For everything from questions about cucumbers to homes on cul-de-sacs, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, learn about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Call them anytime at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And a big good morning to you as we start off another edition. I am, of course, Stan the dad, and I am so proud I have such a great son that I get to work with, and you are?
And, of course, I am James DeFreitas. I am the co-host, and each and every week we are here to talk about plant and or real estate questions. And I always like to start off the show with talking about your website, which is AskMrGreenThumb.com. That's ASKMR Green Thumb. So no, you don't need to put in the MISTER. That will take you to the wrong place and you'll be sad. So we don't want you to be sad. So you go to AskMrGreenThumb.com, and in the left corner you'll see an Ask button. You click on the Ask button and you can actually ask Stan a question. You can take your phone. You can do it right from your phone. You can take a photo. You know, if you have a photo that's on there and you don't know what something is that's going right or wrong in your yard, you can snap a photo off and send it directly to us. They always say a photo is worth 1,000 words, and that is always the case here. If you have a bug identification, well, if you take a close-up shot of the bug and you want to know what it is, we can do that too. We're pretty good at getting these things returned to you, usually 24 to 48 hours after you hit send. You know, if it's a weekend, it could be a little bit longer, or if it's a holiday, maybe a little longer there as well. But we do get back to people, and it's a free service. We do this just because we are nice guys.
We try to help folks wherever we can. Yeah, we'll identify the head, abdomen, and thorax, which is what you'd find on the insect. Just to show you, I did work as an extension horticulturist for 8 years and answered about 100,000 questions. Today we have a guest who, Alan Weatheralt, who is a friend of mine for, I was trying to figure up last night, about 47 years. Now,
47 years?
Long time, almost coming up to the 50 mark. And Alan is a great guy, and we were actually met in Hort School. We had Everett Wilcox was our instructor, who was a great instructor. I eventually took over his class a number of years later, but I don't know Everett was, a master horticulturist. I don't know if I'd ever put myself in the same category as Everett, because he just, had us doing all kinds of stuff. I mean,
so this was circa 1974, right?
Around that stage. Yeah, I think around 74-ish probably, because I remember I started work a little bit after that with the Extension Service, and probably 75-ish, and then I got married in 76. Which, of course, I remember. February 14th, so I could never forget Valentine's Day. And I thought, I have no excuse. A lot of guys go, I just forgot. Well, with me, there's no way to forget. But I can make one box of chocolate be both an anniversary and...
That's a bit cheating.
Yeah, well, and as long as I don't eat all the chocolate, I'm okay. But Alan is representing Tri-County Metals. I think you said your son's business?
It's my son's business, yes.
And
okay, great.
You owned Clearwater Taxi?
Beach Taxi.
Beach Taxi. And we were talking about a story that we went fishing probably 47 years ago. We had caught some trout, and somebody called, and we had to run off and go pick up the fare, which happened to be where Grandma Polly worked.
The Dervishes.
Dervish Brothers.
The Dervish Brothers place.
Yeah, Dervish Brothers Gallery.
That's it.
The gallery. And Grandma Polly worked there, ran the bar upstairs. And small world.
Back when there wasn't all of these condos and high rises.
Well, they were starting to build them, but it was. You could actually see the beach on occasion.
Right. There was some sand and some beach balls back then, and now there's high rises from eye to eye. But so, anyways, give everyone a little background, Alan, of your time. I mean, you run businesses. You were in the taxi business. And then you're helping your son in Tri-County Metals. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Well, I met Stan back when, like he mentioned, back when we were studying horticulture. I was in the landscaping business at the time, and so
my heart goes out to you because that's a tough business.
He didn't know his plant material that well yet either. He was learning on the job.
Yep, that's true. That was true. But it was one of those things where I got hired on as contract labor type work. We helped a guy landscape some mobile homes. So my cousin and I said, well, we can do this. So we went and bought a couple shovels, a couple pickup trucks, and started digging holes and putting plants in and setting up deals with nurseries and so forth. Then people started asking questions. I thought, man, maybe I better learn something about what I'm doing.
Sure.
So,
Green side up.
yeah. So anyways, I ended up getting in horticulture class down there at PVTI.
Right.
And I'd studied everything they had to offer down there. I graduated from SPJC at the time in '71, and I was going into engineering. And all of a sudden, electrical engineers were a dime a dozen. There wasn't any market for it, so I had to switch professions. I got married in the process, and of course, the draft was still going on.
I remember.
So I'm going to school, getting my deferment and so forth. So, anyways, I went from that to few other businesses that I tried: mobile auto detail, action lawn and landscaping.
Wow.
So I did some of that stuff. And then my grandmother got sick up in Canada, and my dad had to go up there and ask me if I'd come watch his cab business for him. So my wife and I went over and we watched the cab business and kept it going for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, my businesses kind of fell off by the wayside, and that my parents didn't get back for like 3 months.
Okay.
So I kind of got stuck in the cab business. I swore I'd never be in the cab business because my dad was gone all the time. I never got to play baseball with him. I mean, he was gone when I got up in the morning, and he didn't get home till. But I was kind of laughing the other day over on the beach where the roundabout is. Somebody was talking about the roundabout, and if I remembered the roundabout, I said, oh, yeah, I remember it very well because that's where my dad's taxi stand was. There was a telephone pole out in front of a restaurant that had a metal box on it, and I'd sit in the car with him. He had a 1957 Chevy, four-door. My mom called it a hard top because it was the one that the windows went down and you could climb out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was a hard top. So, anyways, I'd sit there and all day with my dad. When my mom had to take my sister someplace or something, and I wanted to spend some time with my dad, I'd sit in his taxi cab with him. Every now and again, he'd go into the bar and get me a Coke for 5 cents.
Wow.
So,
I remember those days.
Yeah. Well, and I miss the beach diner that was there in that location. I mean, that's a place that I remember driving to as a young man. And so a part of me, was disappointed at the progress of what the city planners decided was the best way to get people in and off the beach. And I guess maybe it's faster, but they sure didn't think about the idea of educating the general populace, since we didn't have a lot of roundabouts in Clearwater at the time.
Right.
And we had so many accidents as soon as that thing went up, especially with that beautiful fountain that they built.
Yes.
And so you had people looking off to the left instead of looking to see if they could actually exit and enter the lane that they were trying to get into. I mean, roundabouts work really good in Europe. They have them everywhere there, but the general population there seems to understand them better.
Right.
Here, it was a kind of a novel. Now I'm seeing them everywhere, so, but, I was telling Stan the other day, it was probably 6 months to a year ago. I had a lady, she rear-ended me as I was trying to get into a roundabout that's kind of near where I live. And the reason I didn't go into the roundabout is because I was yielding, because there was a United States postal truck that was in the already, had the authority to be in the roundabout. And so she, so I said, well, let's go over here and, and let's talk and see if there's any damage on the vehicle. And of course, my thought process is when somebody's in the wrong and I don't see any damage and I'm okay, then at least give me 60 seconds for me to stand on my soapbox so I can admonish you correctly. And, and she goes, well, I don't really want to hear this. And I said, okay, well, if you don't want to hear it, then we could always call the cops and they could write you a ticket. Well, no, I don't want that. I said, well, then can you let me do my 60 seconds of admonishing, and then we'll be on our way. That's my philosophy on how to handle
One way or
things.
another, you're getting a penalty here.
So, and really,
penalty box.
and really, my admonishing was really, hey, let's go over the concept of a roundabout and how that works in case you're unfamiliar. Because she also seemed like she was maybe not from the area. So, needless to say, it was no harm, no foul, no damage done. But I do think roundabouts, they can be very efficient. But I also think that you have to have I don't think there was the push in Pinellas County for education that should have been there prior to such a project going into play. And one of my
They're gonna have roundabout school.
I don't know what they should. I can tell you that if you don't have any roundabouts and you have driver's education courses taking place at the high school level and they don't have any place for them to teach this, you're going to have a lot of kids that are going to go, I'd rather parallel park than go around that roundabout.
And most kids hate parallel parking, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
But,
yeah. Well, that's interesting. A little bit of history of, James is, I call my throwback son, because one of his first cars was a 1966 Mustang. And he took the thing all apart.
I did.
And one day I came out and there was a little oil on the driveway, and I started to get kind of like my dad might have. And I looked at it and I said, if this is the worst thing my son does, I should thank the Lord every day that I got a son who wants to take a motor apart and put it back together and the driveway. And I thought, shush my mouth and don't say anything, because
It's not exactly how it went, but I appreciate that he remembers it in a much more positive tone than I remember it in.
well, revisionist history. History is by those who tell it.
Let me just say the driveway was very clean by the end of the day.
but I was happy that, and actually he made the thing run. I think you and Bernardo, Jack alone.
Yeah, and I will say it was nice because I had a neighbor mentor who
was a nice guy.
who was a kindred spirit who definitely appreciated the idea of working on cars, and so it was nice to have somebody who could be no, don't do that, do this. And so we kind of, but I took it all apart and had the engine heads remachined and everything that needed to be done, and it was a lot of fun. It was an education, and it was nice to work on something that wasn't very complicated. Now the cars today are, you might as well be living in the Jetsons in terms of how complex they are. But yeah, Clearwater, talk about an area that has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
It's just so if I think it's changed dramatically, I can only imagine if you add a few more years onto the tank, how much you guys think it might have changed as well, because I barely recognize it.
Well, as I said, when I was a young child, my dad would take us to Weeki Wachee, and once you got past St. Pete, there were only two lights between there and Weeki Wachee. And so that dates me
amazing.
Just a tad.
Yeah.
Probably get half our audience are going, God, this guy really is ancient old. But, well, yes, I am. But I was on a first-name basis with Methuselah. But I'm not saying I'm old.
Well,
anyway.
with that noise, we're going to go pay some bills, but don't change that dial. We are here every Sunday morning from 8 to 9 in gardening and real estate. And stay tuned.
Stay tuned for the talk.
Want to talk real estate auctions? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, floridaauctionteam.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at askmrgreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give them a call, 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we're glad that you're with us. We have Alan Weatherelt, who's with us, who I've known for, 47 years. And Alan was telling me about some new cool book that he really enjoys.
Yeah, I'm reading this book, Sorry You Missed It, by Fred Hosley. And it dates back to my childhood, growing up in Clearwater. I moved to Clearwater in 1958, and this book is 1957, going into first day into middle school or junior high school. It's Clearwater Junior High, which is no longer there. But it's so interesting listening to him tell a story, and I can identify with everything that he did. Like, he's talking about Hog Island, which is Caladesi, but back back then it was known as Hog Island. We went out exploring Hog Island, and when I was in the Sea Scouts, we camped out on the spoil islands out there, and so I remember distinctly starting Clearwater Junior High, riding my bike over there, and so forth. And now he's talking about the different instructors, Mr. North and Mrs. Vernazzi, and so forth. I'm having a hard time putting it down. I listened to it all the way over here, you know, and talked about the pass being open up on the north end of Clearwater Beach, where the Miss Buckeye used to go out, and the sea fever over there on the shore, and how they and all those things that I did. I knew the sea fever. I've been out in the Miss Buckeye fishing, and so it's kind of really bringing back a lot of things. The stores downtown you shopped in, the little restaurants you ate in, and so forth. And so
yeah, it sounds like it'd be a good book for someone to give for Christmas. Anybody who's a wants to know a little bit more about the history, or maybe if you're like Alan and I, and you're older than dust, you lived through some of it.
Absolutely. Well, one of the books, too, that I had read recently, and again, you can go to your local library and grab this book, but one of the books that I enjoyed is called The Swamp, and it's kind of it's a history of Florida, and I actually think it should be required reading for every high school student. It's probably not suited for middle school, but it's certainly for an adult, soon-to-be adult theme, but it's kind of nice, and it explains, how Florida, the landscape became the way it did. I mean, it goes back, and one of the interesting stories in the Swamp book that I think is interesting is they talk about some people in the, this was just after World War I, and they talk about them in an open air ride that they're driving from Tampa to Miami, and as they do so, their car breaks down, and you can imagine there's no street lights. It's a dirt road. It's not anything like we think of today. And he did have a lantern with him, and so one of the things he did is he, had the lantern up, and he's looking all around, and he eventually turns the lantern off, and then they can see from the moonlight 1,000 little beady eyes that are staring back at them, and it's a level of wildlife. Yeah. Well, and again, they kind of leave it to your imagination as to what it is, but all of a sudden, I think we forget just how inhabited Florida once was, and it's not ancient history. Going back 100 years, I know that sounds like a long time, but it really isn't that long. And the transformation that the state of Florida has had in the last 100 years, from taking areas that were really probably should not have been built on, and draining them. It was the Army Corps of Engineers that was ultimately brought in to the state of Florida to help drain the swamp, because it really started, we think of the Everglades as being a small little section that takes place in South Florida, but it was all the way up through, the Magic Kingdom area in Orlando, that the moving, growing reeds of grass went all the way that forward, and then now it's been degraded down to a very small area in Florida. So again, The Swamp is a great book that I definitely recommend people take a look at, because they paint a very interesting picture of the history of Florida that I think should be required reading, and it gives people a great background that it wasn't an easy place to live. I had a history professor one time say, look, if we wouldn't have had the invasion of Florida that we had if we didn't have the invention of DDT and air conditioning. These are two things that made Florida living very possible. Yeah.
Sure. We both grew up in times where people had air, but I didn't have air. We had fans,
right?
And box fans and things of that nature.
We went to school, there was no air.
There was no air. It was hot at school. You were lucky they opened up the transom thing to let air in. I went to North Shore and then Riviera, which is no longer there either, junior high, and then St. Pete High, where my grandmother had been the first music teacher. Mm-hmm. She came here in the early 20s. And my granddad, Doc Miller, was the first chief of staff at Mountain Park, which became Bayfront Medical Center.
Right, and every time that we've ever been in that hospital, one of the things Stan asks is, do you know what the original name of this hospital was? And most of the people that work there have no idea. and it's a travesty. And the reason I say that is that we have the internet now. We have YouTube. We have all of these mediums. There is really no reason. I mean, you on your way here could listen to a book that reminisced about history starting in 1957. There is no reason on God's green earth that we don't know more about our history, and I always encourage people to learn more. Knowledge is power, and what we don't know can hurt you. And so, it's
the Native Americans built those mountains down there, and they kind of built the hospital around them. That's the reason they called it Mountain Park.
Right.
And it's funny. I went down one day to see. I said, "Well, where's the person that keeps the archive?" So I waited and found this young little girl in a small office, and I said, "Well, I've heard the story that my grandfather, Doc Miller, was the first chief of staff here, but I wondered if you had anything." She goes, "Oh, well, yeah, I have some stuff. We have a photoed mimeographed stuff." She says, "But most of all the old stuff I threw away." And I said, "Well, your idea of being an archivist and my idea of being an archivist might be slightly different."
Yeah.
Because you don't just throw away all the old stuff and say, "Yeah, you look at the side of the building. See, it tells you." 1918 or whatever. I'm going.
Yeah, and a quick tip, if I may make one. If people don't know this, a lot of the stuff that used to only be obtained on microfiche is now on Google Archives. Oh. So somebody has done a large digital archiving of a lot of the stuff that you could only once get when you went into the library. So I have found that to be a very handy resource when looking up facts and figures of things that once were. So, and on that nerdy-sounding note, we will take a break, but we are here with Alan with Tri-County Metals, and we will be
might
talking
talk about that a little bit, too, on the other side of the break. You stay with us as the plant talk, real estate talk, and metal roof talk, and history talk continues. Here on WGUL 860 The Answer.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at askmrgreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial problems with flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we want to welcome Alan, of course. We want to thank all of our sponsors, too, like Black Cow and Easy Breezy AC. And also, of course, Plants, PLANTZ, and Stafford Tree Service, because without them, we wouldn't have a show for you.
That's true.
And so we thank them heartily. We recommended the Easy Breezy AC the other day, and I called him up and I said, "Hey, I've got a job for you." And he goes, "My technician's already been there for 5 minutes."
That's
and
amazing.
I said, "Well, I appreciate that because it makes me look good. If you're following up on that quickly, that is fantastic service, and that's what we like to hear back."
Absolutely.
Alan, tell me a little bit about what does Tri-County Metals, what do we do? Now, I'm interested in metals because I've got an old roof now that one of these days, actually, James and I put the last roof on 20 years ago, 30-year shingle. But, a 30-year shingle means 20 years, and I'm near the lifespan.
Maybe 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Of when it's going to go. Actually, an inspector came out last year and said you may have as long as 5 because I was trying to make sure I had an insurance break. But I kept looking at that and I thought, what I want to do sometime, here's my wish list, is to put a nice metal roof on so I don't ever have to worry about it again because I'm getting too darn old to want to climb up there anymore. And also maybe put some solar on because I'd love to be able to tell the power company to take this bill and whatever.
Yeah. There you go.
But,
so one question I have for you with Tri-County Metals is this a business where if I'm in the roofing business, I'm that are you geared towards more wholesalers or do you actually sell to retail customers as well? Both. Okay. So they can reach out because that's kind of what I got from when I went to your website. And again, if people want to go to your website, it's tricountymetals.com, correct?
TriCountyMetals.com.
TriCountyMetals.com, and then they can call 833-852-8423 if they want to talk to somebody that can, help them with their sales.
There's also 8 branches.
Okay.
So
they can go to a showroom.
Yeah. Yeah, we cover the whole state of Florida. We deliver to the whole state of Florida. I think they have like 20 trucks now, 4 semis.
Wow.
And we're the only company that offers next day delivery.
That's amazing.
So yeah,
Well, that's pretty good.
That is amazing. So let me ask you another question. I'm sure you guys get this a lot. You get a lot of people that will just go into Lowe's and they'll buy whatever Lowe's sells, or they'll go into Home Depot and they'll buy whatever Home Depot sells. Why are you guys a superior brand and product over what you could just buy off the shelf?
well, if you go into Lowe's or Home Depot, they have one type of metal, and it's probably 8 or 10 foot long.
Right.
But who wants a bunch of seams in the roof that might leak and so forth? And you know, if you have a 20-foot roof and you have a 10-foot panel, what do? Overlap it? So
Yeah.
all of our stuff is all custom made. We deal mostly with contractors. We used to be a lot of residential or individuals that were doing DIY, you know. But I talk like I know what I'm talking about, but it's my son's business.
Sure.
And I came along after 50 years in the cab business and decided I was going to try outside sales. So I tried to learn a little bit so I could go out and sell some metal. Just kind of 50 years in the cab business kind of burned me out.
Sure.
And,
Who wouldn't?
but anyways, the roofing business is there's different types of metal, and there's different paint goes on the metal and different quality of paint that goes on the metal. It's a very sophisticated business. But it like on our roof we have you'd mentioned, Stan, about the shiny silver.
Yeah, I've seen it. One of my neighbors has it, and I actually stopped and said, let me take a picture of your roof. I like it because it looks shiny and bright. I said, but of course, if I cover it with solar panels, I don't know if it matters that much.
So when the no-name storm came through, it blew off the shingles off our roof. So
Okay.
I'd already, like you, I'd put shingles on one roof, and I didn't want to go up there. I was getting a little older, and I was like, nah, I don't want to mess with that. I don't have time now to get up there and put a roof on. So I went with a metal roof. So at the time, 30 years ago, a metal roof was $5,000. A shingle roof was $3,000.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So the thinking back then was, well, if it lasts for 2 or 3 times the length of shingles, so it's been up there for 30 years now. No rust on it, no leaks, and so forth. My neighbors have had 2 shingles. When Irma came through, when half the beach lost shingles and had to have the roofs repaired, mine's sitting up there. I didn't have to worry about it. I haven't had to worry about it, with my family. They've been protected from the elements. So I'm a big proponent of having a metal roof.
Is there different gauges? And you talk about paint. What kind of paint? Is it white or silver or?
All different kinds. I can't tell you how many different colors there are now. There was like 20, but
Well, it
it's
seems like
Silver
the lighter
Williams. It's baked on paint.
Would reflect more.
Right.
Let's say
the lighter colors reflect more. You actually, a painted roof will pay for itself in 30 years.
Wow. Wow.
So you get a free
So
roof.
even though it's more expensive today than doing a traditional, and as it was when you did yours, it still pays for itself in the long run. You know, so I mean, because one of the things in our real estate business that with working with Keller Williams, I run into a lot of people who are in a position where they're going to need a new roof, and and they're all and again, especially if they're investors.
Sure.
I always tell them, I'm like, well, if you're investors and you're going to be looking at this predominantly as a rental unit, you want to be up here shingling this every 15 years? I said, or do you just want to do it once and be done with it? And I'm baffled by the cheaper now versus the not having something that's more robust for the long term. And they're just looking at that initial upfront investment. And I'm finding that I find that troubling. So I don't have a good in the sales business, you're always looking for rejection, objection handling. And so what is a good way to respond to somebody who is just looking at the cheaper cost instead of the long-term investment?
Well, when you put a metal roof on, your property value immediately goes up. I think it's 6 or 8%.
Oh, wow.
So compared to a shingle roof and you're always worried about that letter. Well, you're uninsurable. You got to get your roof replaced. 30 years I've never gotten one of those letters.
Yeah,
and you
they know.
And you're not gonna.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So it's the last roof you ever need. So
Now, you said, when you did yours 30 years ago, it was 3,000 to 5,000. Approximately, what's the difference now for that same roof? Obviously, that roof is, 10,000 for shingles, and how much for the metal? What's the difference in price?
it's about 30% more.
Okay, so not. I mean,
It's not even as bad as it was back then.
Back then, really?
Because everything's improved. Our company is, my son's company, has grown substantially, and so they're more cost effective. There's certainly a lot more technology and understanding with metal now, as everything's improved. But I think you could look at about 25 to 30% more in cost, but
wow. So if the main cost, and I've always been told this, and you can correct me, obviously, the main cost is labor when you're putting up something.
Yeah.
If it's only a 25 to 30% price increase, I'm baffled then as to why anyone would ever want to use a shingle roof.
exactly.
I mean, it's baffling.
It's a no-brainer.
It seemed to me
Yeah.
like it almost might be easier once you had the roof clean and ready to go, that you could put up those panels easier than doing a bunch of. It might be quicker than doing a lot of shingles.
Well, there's a couple different types of roofs. There's exposed fastener, which I think is the one
One
that
I
you
showed
saw.
you.
And then there's a concealed fastener, so you
Which
don't
you said
see those.
might be better.
They're better if you're going to put solar panels on, because
That's what I was talking
you
about.
you want to conceal the penetrations in your roof, because that's where the leaks come from.
Well, it seemed like every time you put another
penetration.
screw into something, you're causing a potential spot for a leak.
Right. So with the concealed fastener, the screws are all covered up, so I don't see any weather.
So it's basically concealed, hidden fasteners, and fasteners is the type of roofs that you guys are selling.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes perfect sense. And again, so just so that I understand, the roofing that Stan was talking about earlier, that's called a Galvalume product. Galvalume. So that's sort of now, and I think that there is a little bit of a misnomer here too, in that it's not naked metal. I mean, this has still got something on it, right?
Still has a coating on it.
Still has a coating on it. Okay.
So it's still steel with aluminum. It's not just aluminum, right? Or is it aluminum?
It's galvanized aluminum.
Galvanized aluminum.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So it is. I just was trying to get in my mind if they put something together with something, but it actually is all. Those are all aluminum.
Right.
And now that would seem to me. I know we all have seen those old farm roofs. You'll see from here to Canada that are what I call the old steel, and they all eventually rust. And of course, that may be 30 years down the road, but they're not. To me, that's not as attractive as what I was thinking of.
Well, when you talk about that stuff, I remember back when I was a boy working at the gas station on the beach. One of my jobs was waxing cars because the paint all went dead. You don't see paint jobs going dead anymore, but that's the difference in the paint now. So
Sure.
it's the same way with the metal, the Galvalume. It's been protected. Back when we had the concerns about the acid rain, and that really was affecting the metal roofs. They changed the process, so they put coating on it. So. Our car has been out in the sun since 2016 on Clearwater Beach, and it looks just like the day we bought it. So that's the new paint jobs and the new protection they have on the metal.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, again, when they found that there was an engineering challenge, they rose to the occasion to change it.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So it's, to me, if anybody is out there and is interested in putting on a metal roof, you certainly will not find a better company than Tri-County Metals. Go to TriCountyMetals.com. And of course, their number is 833-852-8423 if you want to dial in that way. And of course, that music means we're going to go pay some bills. So don't change that dial. And we'll be here for one more break set.
We'll be talking about plants, trees, houses. Obviously, if you have houses, roofing is the number one issue. It's the number one reason that a deal will fall through. We'll talk about that, too. Stay with us as the Plant Talk and Roof Talk continues here on WGUL.
Want to talk real estate auctions? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, FloridaAuctionTeam.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at AskMrGreenThumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give them a call, 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we are fortunate, James and I are both, to have Alan in here with us with Tri-County Metals. And Alan and I kind of reconnected over health a little bit. We both have had some heart problems. I had a new heart put in, as you all know, maybe last March. Maybe you don't know. But I feel blessed that I'm still here, alive. And Alan was ready to be cut upon, and he got into a drastic, I'm going to take charge attitude. And I guess you kind of saved your life by changing your lifestyle. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was extremely blessed. I'm very thankful. I decided I wanted to focus on my health for a year. And so October 1st, I kind of retired from Tri-County Metals and decided to work on my health. And so I started seeing a dietitian the first of the year, and so forth, and started losing a little weight and trying to eat right, eat healthy, eat the way, the dietitian was telling me, the way she was taught, and so forth.
Well, tell us a little bit about that.
And
what are you eating that's different now?
Well,
no more hot dogs.
No more hot dogs. No more meat. No meat. No dairy. No eggs. No processed foods at all. Well, process gets a little questionable sometimes because
it's hard to know.
Olives are processed, or
yeah.
But I need to stay away from olives. But cereal is processed, and so. But basically, if you go into a store, there's only a handful of items other than fresh fruits and vegetables and frozen fruits and vegetables that's even in the store that it's even on my diet. So because.
So you had to make a dramatic change.
Yeah, well,
Tell them why.
In October, I went in and I wanted to stress test. At one time in my life, I was a marathon runner, and I thought,
wow.
I thought I was 253 pounds. I lost 60 pounds and ran my first marathon in 7 months.
Wow.
So I went from walking 0 to 7 months later, I ran my first marathon at Disneyland, Disney World.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to run another marathon. So I asked my cardiologist about running a marathon. She said, well, let's do a stress test. And, so the stress test proved that I was in good shape. She said, you passed the same thing a pilot has to pass to get his license. So I don't see any reason why, if you want to do it, if everybody else is okay with it, go for it. So I was like, okay. So in the meantime, I read a book, a local doctor, 30-Day to Heart Health, and it talked about a marathon runner in there dropping dead from a heart attack. And I was like, it talked about plaque buildup in your veins. So when I saw the cardiologist, I said, well, what about plaque buildup? She says, well, I think you're in good shape, but if you're concerned, we'll do some tests. She says, but she doesn't seem to be very worried about it. She's a Harvard graduate, and I trusted her.
Sure.
That she'd been taking care of me for a number of years. So lo and behold, she did some tests. She says, well, we need to do some more tests.
Oof.
We did some more tests, and she says, well, we need to do a heart cath. So then they...
I've had a few of those. They're not fun. Go ahead.
So then the surgeon, I thought I was going to get stents, right? They're going to find some blockage, put some stents in. I was going to come out a new guy. So after the anesthesia and everything wore off, he said, well, where your blockages are, if I put a stent in, it's going to give you a heart attack.
Oof. Yeah, that's no good.
He says, I didn't want to do that without talking to your cardiologist and coming up with a game plan. So when I saw the cardiologist, she says, well, bypass isn't really going to be too good because you got 90% blockages in your widowmaker. And she said stents would be the best way to go. And I said, well, as soon as the surgeon told me the prognosis, I started reading about, what can I do? So then I started just diving into every book. I read Dr. Esselstyn's book, How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and it made sense. So I asked my cardiologist when I went in about, can I just change my diet? And she was like, well, I don't really know anything about it, but I know quite a bit about it now. But so I just changed my diet, and she said, well, if we can get your cholesterol down to a certain level, which is 70, she said, we'll just go with the diet and see how that works out for you. So she knew I was a pretty active guy.
Yeah, most doctors don't know a lot about nutrition. It's not they get about maybe a day or two in classes on nutrition. It's not a big thing, or at least it didn't used to be.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too, I mean, something we could change, and I'd like to see it changed in the healthcare space, is that we pay for chiropractic care. We don't really pay for nutritionists or dietitians, and that's unfortunate because I think a lot of the problems could be head off at the pass if people were willing to do what you did. Because I imagine the nutritionist and dietitian, you're probably paying out of pocket for this.
Well, fortunately, when you reach a certain age, and if you're obese,
okay, then they will.
Yeah, and I was definitely obese. I at my highest weight, I was 253. I dropped down to 225 when I saw the dietitian.
You look like $140 now.
I'm a $140 now.
Yeah, you look to be in great shape.
But, anyways, it took me. I lost about 10 pounds a month.
Wow.
On this whole food plant-based diet.
I'm going to get Brian in there on this after a bit here.
Well,
we need to get him.
And here's something that's interesting in health. And I say this, and we had a health fitness guru person that was in here just a few weeks ago, Constantine.
Yep.
And he's another guy that's a great
He's
great
big on
person.
exercises and
Exercise
stuff.
and eating.
But nutrition.
But one of the things that we were talking about with him is, the mindset. We were talking about, because a lot of times people talk about wanting to do something better. But if they don't get right in their mind and make that commitment to themselves, then, you can have the best intentions in the world. But in your case, it was either do something or do something radical, and then the consequences between doing nothing and doing something radical were just so great that you had to do something. It almost shocked you into doing something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, in a lot of ways, one of the things that I find interesting is that my doctor, and, he's constantly monitoring, because, Stan had the, so it's raised the level of awareness for myself just by being the son to somebody who's had a heart transplant. Is, I have to think of it too. I have to, but one of the things that's happened is that more younger people are being seen by doctors than in any time in the past because more people have insurance now than they've ever had in the past. And so the question that my doctor was posing to me is, he said, well, one of the things that we're going to find are people going to have less problems as they reach their 60s and 70s because they were seeing doctors earlier and were getting better information sooner. And he said, and I tend to think that we will see people that, he said, now whether or not they follow the advice that's given, that's a whole other story. He says, but at least they were given the information they needed at a much earlier point in their life.
Well, it's hard to give up, crackers and cheese and, if you like a beer, those are comfort things that so many Americans take as part of, I remember playing, we'd play 3 sets of tennis and I'd be tired. I'd go, well, let's go by the Wendy's and get a big single hamburger with extra fries, and it was easy. So I would go do that. So I knew, and I also I didn't smoke, I didn't drink much, I was pretty athletic. I was playing tennis 3 times a week at one point. I was doing some martial arts.
Right.
I consider myself probably one of the better health guys for an old dude.
Neither one of you, what I suspect. If you're out running marathons, you're playing tennis 3 times a week, playing 3 sets of tennis. Neither one of you probably ever suspected that you'd ever have these kinds of problems. No. And so, and that's exactly why they call it the Widowmaker. Because you're unsuspecting. And I tend to think the healthier you perceive yourself to be, the more at risk you could potentially be.
And we want to save somebody. If Alan and I can save one person out there, you go get a test and maybe don't just say, well, you look pretty good. I had a stress test done a few years ago before I had my heart thing. And the lady said, well, I can't really tell you anything. She says, but your heart is strong. And I thought, well, guys, my heart's strong. Yeah. And it was strong. Right. I could do...
So a stress test doesn't tell you everything you need to know.
Doesn't tell you anything.
Right. So if you hadn't followed up with that...
Yeah.
could have dropped dead.
I could have dropped dead.
Your wife could very well be a widow today.
Yeah.
And you are seeing a Harvard graduate doctor who knows her stuff. And if it wasn't for the persistence of getting more testing, you would have had problems. So, again, I think the takeaway from everybody listening here today is follow up, be tenacious, be persistent with your doctor. And if you're not sure, keep testing.
Be proactive.
That's right.
Alan, we want to appreciate we didn't get to talk as much about Tri-County Metals as we wanted
Right.
to, but the hour
Or
went
your
by.
charity, we'll have to have you back on,
Yeah.
and we'll talk more about some of those things too. But we sure do appreciate people listening. Alan, you're a fantastic guest.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate being here and having a chance to share.
Thank you.
Until next week, enjoy your life and garden just as much as you can, and enjoy this world we're in.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at Ask Mr. Green Thumb.